Well, Dr. Vilburn, my name's Austin Alexander. I'm a physical therapist, and I teach in our physical therapy and physician assistant program at Hardin-Simmons University in Texas. So I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. I pulled up the virtual dissection database and got access to it, and have really enjoyed getting to look at it. So just to start kind of looking at the virtual dissection database, looking at this free resource for anatomy educators and being able to enhance the digital and cadaver-like material and teaching experience. So I appreciate you joining me, and could you just kind of tell me a little bit about the creation of the virtual dissection database, and why do you kind of think it was the right time to jump into that?
So it was about 5 years ago I had a similar thought about doing something like this, but most of the people I talked to felt like this was, nobody's going to want to have the anatomical stuff shared out there, and so it kind of, I didn't really do much with it at the time. But in March of 2020, as everything was shutting down, there were some virtual meetings that were held between a bunch of anatomists, and in a couple of those meetings, people made comments about how they weren't able to get into their lab and how they weren't able to access any videos, and they were feeling kind of stuck as to how am I going to teach anatomy. And there were a couple people that said, well, I've got videos that I'm willing to share. And they said, the only problem is I don't know how to share those while keeping them still secure and respecting the donors that have helped us make those videos. So that was kind of when I felt like, okay, this could work. And it was at that time I approached the American Association for Anatomy, said, hey, a bunch of people have this idea. I don't have the ability to create this whole thing on my own. I would need some help and some guidance. And they responded that people had approached them in the past several times and it never had been right, but with the pandemic going on, they felt that it was the right time. So it was kind of, everything kind of coming together to a point where they felt like this was the time to make a resource that people around the world could use.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So how did the American Association for Anatomy, what was their role in the project?
So obviously they've helped with funding. We're very grateful for the help with that. In addition to that, they've helped with a lot of the publicity for it using their newsletters, and in the conference they had, in their annual conference, they also made mention of it there. So they've done stuff to help publicize this and make it bigger, which has been really great because I'm not that big on social media. I'm not, I don't have that, I'm not an influencer. So I needed a little bit of help to get this out there. So they've really helped to put this out there, and they've paid all the funding for it, which has really made it possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really helps to kind of launch this and get it to where it is today. So looking at the development, I know there's a lot of technical things that you must consider, but also the ethical perspectives with the use of this platform. How have you addressed those, and did you obtain any help from any other outside sources related to that?
We've had a lot of help. This is definitely something that couldn't have come together without help. So as far as the technical perspective, here at University of Nebraska Medical Center, Megan Brown is the person that helps all the anatomists with technical things to begin with, and she's been a huge help for us here. Without her, we would still be, scratching pictures on the walls of caves around here. But so she's been a huge help. Anytime my computer isn't doing what I want to, she walks in the room, touches it, and it works again for me. So she's got that kind of magic. As far as the ethical perspective on things, the American Association for Anatomy created a advisory board for us. There's 4 individuals on that advisory board that their job is to make sure that we kind of stay in the lines and make this the best product possible. So a lot of that has dealt with, what exactly is acceptable in a video, and what types of videos would we accept. Some of the things that they've come up with was obviously the body donor has to know that their body was going to be used and has to have given consent for their body to be used for something like this. And so that was a large part of what we wanted, is to make sure that, is this ethical? You were hearing so much in the news nowadays about unethical uses in the past, and And we want to avoid being that story 100 years from now. And then in addition to that, also, how are we going to make the website secure? Who will we allow to see that website? So there was a lot of conversation that went on with that advisory board trying to make sure that this product is accessible to faculty members that need it, but at the same time that it's giving respect to the donors that help make something like this possible.
Yeah, 100%. I know. I love looking at the that y'all are getting the consents, but the digital consent for the use of those cadavers for this platform. That's awesome. So when we're looking at the content specifically, I know you mentioned other anatomists said that they had videos and they wanted to help. Is the content right now, is that something that you specifically recorded at the University of Nebraska Medical Center?
So we did a bunch of the videos here. I was one of those individuals that said, I've got videos. If I could share them securely, I'd love to do that. But we've also had donors from Drexel University, University of Illinois at Chicago, and University of Southern California. So they've definitely given some to us as well as far as the videos are concerned there.
So you mentioned the other institutions that kind of helped with the database, and primarily most of the videos were done at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. How can other institutions help add more content?
So we are open to more content, and we have a review board here as well to make sure that it's following all those ethical guidelines. But if somebody has content, whether it's videos or still images that they want to donate, they can reach out to me directly at matt.vilburn@unmc.edu, and I'll send them the forms that they need to have filled out. They need to sign that they're giving consent to share the stuff, and there has to be like an institutional signer on that and somebody from the anatomical board. We've got a bunch of forms that we have to have them fill out, making sure that this is all above board. And once they've done that, it's a really easy process to load all the material onto the website, or onto a website where we then have it vetted by our review board before it goes live.
Awesome. So part of those signatures to help kind of maintain state regulations, they have to get the state anatomical board to sign off as well?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So that kind of helps with the varying legal regulations state to state. You kind of cover all of that on the front end. So that's nice. So when we look at the content, and can you kind of just talk to me about how you're utilizing that in your lab?
So as far as the virtual dissection database itself, here at University of Nebraska Medical Center, since we already have a full set of videos that we created in-house, we don't really use the VDD, which is somewhat ironic. We created it, but we don't use it. But what we do with those videos is we have them linked to a digital dissection guide that is pulled up in the lab. So while they're dissecting, they can pull up the videos, they can pull up other images that we have. There's a whole bunch that we have in our digital dissection guide for the students. So they can be pulled up anytime in the lab. They can also access those videos from home through the dissection manual that they have access to. But as far as the VDD, we don't actually link the VDD into that dissection guide.
Yeah, but you're using the videos that are in there. When we're looking at you mentioned that they're pulling them up, they can pull them up in the lab. Are they expected to use their own computers, or kind of how do you do that?
So we have computers for them in the lab. So the computers are in a back room where they aren't affected by the lab materials, and then there's projectors, and they just have a mouse in the lab that they can use. So we can replace the mouse or the mice as they get a lot of wear and tear from the lab materials.
So when we're looking at the recorded content, looking at, you talked about clearing for an ethical perspective, but looking at every institution, how they have varying regulations on donations. You mentioned, so they have to get the anatomical board to sign off, and then did you mention the individual institution has to sign off as well?
Yes, either a department chair or somebody higher up saying, we recognize that this employee is giving away or donating, in most cases, university material to this website.
And just curious, when we're looking at the donation, I know the forms that are obtained from willed body programs kind of vary. Does it have to specifically state that the use of the cadaver will be used in a digital platform?
So as far as that goes, obviously it does vary state by state for how that is done. It does have to specifically state that they have consented to their body being used for educational purposes, and that it's not limited to just that institution. So there are, you know, certain guidelines, and it's in the form that they have to sign from the body donor program has to sign this form saying that it has been covered. I don't read through all of the body donation contracts that are signed at these different institutions. That is on that body donor program to verify that they have met those standards.
Yeah. So when we're looking at, I know there was a huge undertaking. I know you had a lot of these videos already, and I know you had amazing help from the American Association for Anatomy, but was there a point where you felt like this wasn't going to work out?
So last year in the fall, we were hoping to have this up and going for the fall semester, but website development being what it was last year, things were delayed over and over. And they finally had their first version available about mid-semester last fall. And at which point, for me, that's my busiest time of year. I spend all day at work for the most part, either lecturing or in the lab. And so it wasn't a time of year when I had a lot of time to spend on this. And that was the case for a lot of the people that had content to donate to the website as well. I'd had several people reach out, say, I've got content to donate to this. And I said, great, as soon as the website's up and going, we'll have you load it. When the website was up and going, I sent out the thing saying, let's load this stuff up. And everybody's response was crickets.
Yeah.
People were so busy with the fall semester that I got very little response at that time. And it wasn't until December, when things started to slow down, that people were like, oh yeah, I told you I'd donate this stuff. Okay, I can start doing that now.
Yeah.
And so it did have a bit of a delay there where I felt like all these people said they're going to donate. Now no one's donating. What's going on? But ultimately, December and January, a bunch of that content started to come in. We were able to get that reviewed, and we were able to launch this February.
Awesome. So with all the development, how do people get access to this content?
So it's pretty simple as long as you're a teaching faculty member or a graduate student that has teaching responsibilities. Go to virtualdissectiondatabase.com. It'll pull up this sign-in thing in the bottom up corner of that says it's a thing telling you that you get access. You can sign up and you fill out your information there. And then you hit send or okay or whatever it says at the bottom there, and it'll be reviewed and you'll have access.
Awesome. So is this something that they have like a year access, or once they have access, they'll have access forever?
So for teaching faculty, this is something where when we verify that they're teaching faculty, we just give them access. For graduate students, it's a 1 year at a time, because obviously your graduate student status changes. You know, does the person go on to get a job at another institution after they graduate? Do they drop out of the program and no longer have a need for it? So it's something that we do review on an annual basis, and the graduate students do need to have an advisor that signs off saying, yes, this person does need access to this material for teaching purposes.
Okay. So when we're looking at the recent launch of VDD, have you received any feedback from the platform yet?
In general, the feedback that we've received is just a lot of thank yous. I do know that, you know, there have been glitches with the programming of the website that we've been working, you know, ongoing. You know, when it comes up, we've got our tech people that work on that and take care of that. But beyond the minor glitches that you expect with a new website, it's been pretty good.
Awesome. So I'm curious, there's a lot of programs transitioning to more virtual platforms and not even using the actual physical cadavers, not necessarily emphasizing whether that's a good or a bad thing right now, but if a program per se doesn't have access to cadavers, do you feel like this is a good modality that could kind of enhance their program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am fully on board that I think being in the lab, actually dissecting and getting your hands on and seeing those three-dimensional relations of the structures, I think that's the best possible scenario. But I know that there's some places where that's just not a possibility. Even though a lot of people are back in their labs now, I know there's some places that don't have labs to begin with. And so this is giving them access to content that they didn't have before. There were some paid things through publishers out there, but those can get pretty expensive for institutions. And so this is something where, especially in some of the second and third world countries, where as long as they've got an internet access, they can access this and they can then spread this knowledge to the students in those areas.
Yeah, so obviously the COVID-19 pandemic has really put a lot of challenges, especially on anatomy curriculum, and made us think in different ways, especially when we're getting pulled out of a lab. Do you feel like long term these digital databases will have more of a role going forward?
Um, I think that it will have a continued use. Part of the inspiration for this was the virtual microscopy database that came out 5 or 6 years ago, and its use has grown in that time. So I think that this is something that will be used even going forward in the future after everybody's back in person.
You've already kind of mentioned how y'all are using the database. Really, I mean, y'all are kind of different than most institutions because you have access to all of the videos and you have it embedded into their dissection manual. Do you feel like is there any plans for the future to enhance the online part of VDD to include anything like a virtual dissector or anything like that?
We're definitely open to additions and improvements as we go forward. Our biggest thing for improving as we move forward is we're hoping to have a generous donor come forward that says they want to translate some of these videos, make them available in other languages. I don't have the translation skills for something like that, but we're hoping to reach out to some people in the near future, get a volunteer that would say, yeah, I'll translate that into Spanish or into whatever other language so that this can really spread farther throughout the world. Because right now all the videos are in English, and while it's a language that I appreciate because I speak it, I know that the majority of the world doesn't. And so it'd be nice to have this in languages that make it available all around the world.
Yeah, definitely a big challenge. When we look at precautionary measures, I know having a digital database, limiting who gets access, I know you've already addressed those. Are there any other kind of measures or precautionary measures to help to limit inappropriate use of content?
So, I mean, really, there's some trust that has to be in place for this, trusting that a faculty member out there isn't going to give away their username and password to every passerby. And I have that much trust in society that if you're a faculty member, you respect the body donors and respect their privacy enough to not do something like that. If we do see that there is excessive use from one user, we do have the right, and it is in the contract, we do have the right to cancel that user because of what we perceive as inappropriate use. But really, a lot of this is based on trust of the individual that they will do what they say when in the contract that they sign when they come onto the website.
Yeah, 100%. So when we're looking at the virtual dissection, I mean, it's definitely very impressive and it's has a ton of detail, and I can see it being used for programs that don't have cadaver dissection, but also enhancing programs that do, like you mentioned, students being able to see content at home if they go home for the weekend. That could be a huge benefit for them to study. Is there anything else you'd like to share about the content?
So first I want to make a correction on that one. So the students having access from home, that is through the UNMC secure website.
Oh,
The
okay, okay.
VDD does not have access for students on there at this time. So that is something where it is controlled by the faculty member at whatever institution. So that is one of the limitations of the VDD, is that it's not openly available to all students. Because we've all had experiences where we've seen students doing inappropriate things, and we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that this is secure and this is respected.
Yeah, so I appreciate you correcting me on that. So utilizing it in the classroom setting, but not being able to, and that's kind of one of those precautionary measures for inappropriate content. So yeah, I appreciate you for correcting me on that. Is there anything else about the program that you'd like to share?
As far as having access for students, I know there have been some donors that have said, if people want access to load these onto their secure websites, whether it be Canvas or Blackboard or whatever, they have the opportunity to reach out to that actual donor. And some of those donors have said that they're willing to share that with other institutions, so long as it's going to be kept on a secure website. So that is something that can be made available to students at home. But it would be through whatever institution's secure website. So that's definitely a possibility out there, but it wouldn't be the entire collection on the VDD. It would be, you know, whether it's USC or UNMC or whatever institution, if they were able to approve that for a particular individual, that could be shared. That's something that could be set up on the side.
Well, Dr. Vilburn, I appreciate you taking the time and speaking with me and talking more about this resource for anatomy educators. And I look forward to talking to you again, especially when we have more feedback for you to share.
Well, thank you so much for your time.